computer. Good morning, Brandon. What's going on, man?
How you doing, John?
I'm doing great, man.
Good to see you.
Likewise, man. Not like it's been forever. So this is our first attempt at a podcast, an inaugural episode, which if you listen to any podcast, normally the ones they're grassroots. First episode, super awkward, super weird, pretty cringy. So I hope that like we at least meet the mark on that.
If you're talking about meeting the mark and being cringy, I'm sure we're going to kill
that. Well, let's start off. Why don't you introduce yourself first, Brandon? Tell us a little about yourself, some short origin story, and we'll try to keep this the shang-dang-a-lang to 30 to 40 minutes, and then I'll introduce myself after that.
So I was born and raised in Kentucky, currently 37 years old. Joined the military when I was 18, right out of high school. And so far been in the Marine Corps for 18 years. I'm married, second marriage, which I'm sure is, not uncommon amongst the military community.
Par for the course.
Yeah, I used to call it like a first-term marriage, and then you have your careerist marriage. My wife is Ashley, and we have 3 children, Ashton, Xavier, and Brooklyn. We live right outside of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And I think really maybe some of the background that pertains to what you and I have talked about is that I've owned rental properties. I've kind of try to find some passive income streams / side hustles, however you want to put it, throughout my career to help supplement some of the income. So had made a lot of bad decisions with those ventures, made a lot of mistakes, but had a few successes. My wife and I, we currently own a travel agency, which is what we hope to transition our retirement plans into. And I think that about wraps it up.
Right on, man.
Nothing crazy.
Oh, everything's crazy. So, yeah, I'm John Kreutzer. I am 40 years old. I joined the Marine Corps in 2005. A couple different MOSs. Been around for a little while. I'm married, first term marriage, a huge success. Funny story, my wife Maylene just got her citizenship. So I have some interesting views on immigration policy. She was not a US citizen. She was born in the Philippines. We have 2 beautiful daughters together. And I too have embarked on some supplementary income streams. I currently own a rental property in Texas. I came full send today, Brandon, Hawaiian shirt and Texas hat and my big ass mustache.
Yeah, I saw that.
So I figured no shying away from it. And I currently have a real estate license in Texas. I anticipated an early retirement, which did not happen. However, we can learn from that. So I'll at some point in time talk about you getting a real estate license as an active duty member, what that entails and how you can do it from anywhere in the world, essentially. But yeah, I think we probably need to figure out a name, and I've got a couple ideas.
You can't tell it's what I'm over here Googling right now. I was trying to get creative with words, and I'm not good at that.
So the smoke pit in military jargon is typically a place where people congregate. They BS a little bit, they light up a cigarette, they tell their stories, but the smoke pit's kind of a yucky place. Cigarette butts all over, there's ashes, it smells bad. The PFC who popped for weed like 2 or 3 times is there hanging out asking for life advice. Obviously he won't adhere to. So I got an idea, man. I'm thinking, and for a couple reasons, smoking lamp scholarship. Now, I like smoking lamp because it's got some naval terminology, some history behind it. And when you close out a mess night, the smoking lamp is lighted. Join me at the bar or whatever. When you're on a ship, the smoking lamp's lighted. People congregate on the smoke deck. And not that I'm advocating tobacco use, but it's a forum for people to kind of sit around and cut up, share stories. It's a little bit classier. And as far as scholarship goes, I don't think, and I'm pretty sure you'll agree, that education equals a degree, right? That doesn't equal something from a university. Like we can learn plenty of things, trades, skills, from talking to other folks, from other people's experience, standing on the shoulders of giants, if you will. I also like to think there's a little double entendre involved with the smoking lamp scholarship. Scholarship could be a naval vessel, a place where a journey begins. I would jokingly, I would still do it, that leadership is in fact a naval vessel, right? And you've got all kinds of leaders, like some classy leaders, like their leadership is a yacht. You got some military leaders, their leadership is a cruiser, a destroyer, or an aircraft carrier. Because my leadership as a naval vessel is like a camouflage spray painted John boat with a motor that's burning oil that shows up to the pier like 20 minutes later, like, hey guys, shitter's full, like Cousin Eddie. So I kind of like that, like it's a journey. A lamp invokes light, pursuit of knowledge. I don't know. What do you think, man?
Well, I know we had talked about like smoking lamp. And I really do, because the smoking lamp, the smoking lamp being lit typically means that, okay, we're going to get a little informal and talk real.
Yeah.
And I love that. But something we did not talk about that just popped into my head, another place to where things get a little informal and real is the team house. Now, I don't know, right? Like, I like Smoking Lamp Scholarship because I do think that what we've talked about is like, we're hoping to, share something that is educational and informative that can empower men and women that have either served or are serving, to include like first responders, just those that typically we're trying, the demographic of people that you just don't get a lot of time to yourself because the job takes so much out of you and the job requires so much of your attention, which is why passive income is really important, because you just don't have a lot of free time. Well, I'm thinking, I'm just trying to figure out of like what the healthy balance is of like, is it a scholarship? And I like your spin on the naval vessel, right? I'm just not sure, like, I love Smoking Lamp, and that's what I'm trying to, like, maybe I just got to think on it or whatever. But I definitely, something that we talk about, regularly, right, is the team house. The team house is where knowledge is, everybody's kicking knowledge, sharing, war stories. But it's always real. And that's what I like, talking about Smoking Lamp or even Team House, right? Like, it's always a real conversation. It's not filtered. And I think given your personality and my personality, I think that's something that we both value, is something that's unfiltered, like real, raw, valuable, not watered down. So I'm not really sure. I said Smoking Lamp Scholarship just doesn't like pop. But I don't have an alternate. I don't have an alternate right now.
Well, then let me phrase it a little bit differently. So scholarship, like, this isn't a basketball scholarship.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
It's not something to be handed out. The scholarship is more of an undertaking, a commitment to lifelong learning. And I'm not talking about doing your MCIs, or anything like that. Just a lifelong pursuit of, picking the brains of other people who have done some extraordinary things. I've got some, I won't name names because, this is our inaugural episode. But for instance, I know a gentleman who retired after 30 years in the Marine Corps as a CW5 and then became a beat cop. Like, can you imagine like what's going through his head? He's like, I've served for 30 years and now I'm going to wake up and fight a crackhead. Like, that's how my day could go.
Right.
That guy's he probably has some stuff to share with us. Yeah, I know you go with some other guys, some other folks, people in the real estate industry, finance industry. I do think the scholarship sort of signifies the education piece, and then the stories that are passed down and captured. Of course, the smoking lamp is classy. You remember at Warrant Officer Basic Courses, obviously, if they're watching, they've seen you got the red and gold bar coffee cup there. But remember that ceremony? For those who aren't familiar with it, the Hawkins room. It's a bar on the basic.
Not the Hawkins, the Hawk.
The Hawk.
Yeah.
The Hawk. And then remember they passed the lamp.
Yeah.
Which is like to signify the passing of knowledge. And then they also have to have it lit anytime there's a warrant officer in the Hawk. I think it's to let the lieutenants know, like, there's just some weirdo in there, like some crotchety old dude. He's
probably amongst the lieutenants. It's like, hey, like, we're just making everyone aware that
grandpa's here. Like,
yeah, there's a weirdo in here that doesn't belong. And then they tell all the warrant officers, like, no, it's a good thing for you. Like, it's because you guys are going to share knowledge, right? And it's probably something that warrant officers just take and like, oh man, it's really important to us, right? Except others are probably just poking fun, which I'm totally
the old people totally are here. Support. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, how about I think I'm more of like, I just don't know if I like the scholarship because it feels like it's static and not dynamic.
Well, it's moving, man. It's a naval vessel.
I know.
It could sink, dude, at any time.
I like Smoking Lamp Scholars.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because we're going to have a lot of scholars that are going to be on the podcast.
Yeah. Scholars of life.
Yeah, like guys that have a lot of life experience and that are still learning. So I like Smoking Lamp Scholars. I'm just not a huge fan of Smoking Lamp Scholarship.
I'm picking up what you're putting down because I think the Smoking Lamp Scholarship, that's a bit of a mouthful. Right?
I think it's going to be misleading to the wrong person that doesn't give it a chance yet.
It does require a bit of explanation. I kind of had to go like a couple spoonfuls deep on that one.
Yeah, and I you can have like, I think you can run a theme of like, this is going to be a scholarship episode, right? For the Smoking Lamp Scholars, that we're all getting on this ship and we're going in this particular theme or this particular direction, right? But I would be more, I would jump on the Smoking Lamp Scholars, or like I said, I'm favoring Team House something, but that was like one of those light bulbs that came on that has not been unpacked.
Yeah, and
so I don't want to say like anything about that because I don't really know, and anything that comes out of my mouth about Team House, anything will be half baked. So I think for the moment, I think Smoking Lamp Scholars, I'm supportive of.
I like that, man. I'd buy it, dude. Because we could go, we definitely go that route. I think the Team House has some other implications, like who belongs in the Team House. Sure. I think that I like the Smoking Lamp Scholars. It's succinct. It's got a nice ring to it. It doesn't require much explanation as far as what we're doing there, what we try to accomplish. So
I think, I think we can go with that. You'd like to, I don't know, like, what are your thoughts on like the type of, I guess I mentioned a little bit of like, what I thought the target demographic would be, but what are your thoughts on why that demographic would be important, and what do you think we ought to like share? Like, what are the different themes you think?
Well, as far as demographic, I think that like the folks that we're interviewing and our audience are going to be very similar, and by that I mean veterans. And why do I'm not here to like salute myself or like get that free meal from Applebee's or anything like that. But I think that veterans have a very unique perspective because at some point in their lifetime, they've put others before themselves. There's been some type of service, service to others above the self. And they've also, if you're OEF, OIF type guy or gal, you've probably been in some pretty extreme situations, whether it's extreme hardship in terms of climate or environment. You've been away from family. You've lived in a comfortable poverty and somehow found a way to supplement your income. And veterans as military members, we go to boot camp and we're taught to adapt, overcome, and improvise to make do, with what we have, or improvise for what we don't have. So I think there's also a lot of ingenuity that veterans bring to the table in terms of perspective, that you can turn something or turn nothing into something, which I know is a little bit cliched, but the experience that veterans have, whether as family men and women, as veterans themselves, as coming up with a side hustle or side business. And I think empowering those folks who aren't there yet, who don't have that education. Why reinvent the wheel when you can stand on the shoulders of giants? I'm no giant, but I want to find those giants. I want to talk to those giants. I want to pick their brains and see what's made them successful and how others can apply that to their lives.
Yeah, and I think like to add on to that, because I agree with what you're saying. And I think one thing that these past probably, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years, and the 3 or 4 years when I see within our country of the challenges during COVID and the challenges with politics, I think it's really made me have a much greater appreciation for first responders as well.
Right.
So like, you have our early OIF, OEF days, right? To where the military, the US military really, I think they got a lot of praise, right? For like, hey, going off and doing great things overseas. But I think it really, this past 4 or 5 years, just seeing how much first responders are having to get involved. And I think I always regrettably, I think I may have looked past that for a long period of my life, because most of the interactions that you would have with law enforcement aren't usually, them pulling you over to say, hey, I just wanted to tell you have a nice day.
Or thank you for your service.
Right. So like, I think by seeing, how they had to, regardless of what was going on with COVID, and then, we'll say hyper partisanship,
Right.
just seeing on how like your EMTs, your nurses, your doctors, all law enforcement, fire department, all that stuff never stopped. Right. When the military, for a large portion of the military, was allowed to telework during COVID, those things didn't stop like first responders from still having to go out there. So we're like, maybe some of us were able to telework and then maybe, redirect some of our efforts on, hey, what other, how can I bring in more passive income streams? How can I prepare to transition for retirement? How can I prepare to, set up my children for, success? We had time, right? Whereas others, it would be, the only thing I could see it being similar to, right, is like, you're on a deployment every day.
Right? Yeah, and it shouldn't be lost because, for us military guys, we might go out to an austere environment for 6-7 months. If you're in the Army, like a year, you pack all that up and you come home and, you're a father again, you're doing your other thing. Whereas an EMT, a firefighter, police officer, they get up every morning and they might see something absolutely horrific. They might, someone die in a really bad way. And then they have to go to their family that night and like deal with that. So I also think, I know we've talked about this before, but the mental health aspects behind both of those situations, whether it's military or first responder, these are things we need to talk about. And up until very recently, within the last like probably 5 to 7 years, that hasn't been at the forefront of people's minds, to talk about their mental health, their mental state, and seek out a support network. So I think that's an important thing. I know we talked about that, but we ought to bring that to the table as well.
Yeah, and that's why I think I don't know if I even like the use of like a targeted demographic, because I'd like to think that there's no shortage of knowledge, right? Or, nobody has enough, right? No one's learned enough.
No.
But I definitely think that, the demographic of folks within the US that, like I said, like the job just takes so much, and whether it's physical, because there's a lot of physically demanding jobs that don't have anything to do with, being in the military or a first responder or any of that.
Right.
But one thing that I think the military first responder community takes a lot of mental, like a mental, it's a high mental demand. Like you can't go to work and just kind of breeze through that day, right? Like you had mentioned, like an EMT, they can't just go check a box.
No.
Right, with like hey, I've got to make this spreadsheet, and well, I'll get around to it after lunch. They have to be like at a high degree of mental fitness at all times, and I think that starts to wear on you a lot more than maybe physical fitness can over time. So I think that by creating opportunities for you to make better decisions financially, or better transition from the military, or better take care of yourself mentally, by creating some sort of forum, right? That's who I'd like to be able to offer some help to, because there's no shortcut to it, but there can be a more convenient and more efficient way, I think, to learn through others' mistakes. Like learn through our mistakes.
Right, absolutely.
Right. Like don't be 21 years old, you just joined the Navy, and you have to, there should be nothing that someone has to relearn in 2023.
Maybe we should do an episode where we break down what that brand new Mustang costs at a 26% interest rate over time, and be like, here's the money. Here's the money side, because that's the joke, is Lance Corporal with a Mustang at 26% interest rate, like, why is that? I know First Sergeant said it's bad, but let's deep dive into explain what it's going to cost you.
I can see your Mustang and I can raise you a Supra. I built, the majority of my Supra was built on an E3's salary.
Yeah.
Right. Like terrible. There's nothing about that that's an investment. There's nothing about that that's financially smart.
And Brandon, I've known you since like 2015 at least.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen the Supra.
It's because it's always been broken, right? Like it is the worst financial decision that you can make, right? But try to tell a 20-year-old, right, that, hey, you should probably like find some investment opportunities instead of trying to add horsepower to this car. And that's a really challenging thing to get across to a 20-year-old, especially if like it's not very clear to them of how to do that. Right. So I think if, I'd like to think anyway, that if it had been clear to me, of, hey, here's how easy some of these things are, I'd like to think that I would have been like, okay, like, let's do that then. Like, that is a better decision. But going back to the smoke pit, not smoking lamp, in the smoke pit, no one's talking about investing.
No,
right? Everyone's talking about like, what a wild weekend they had, how much they drank, the bad decisions that
the really bad decisions, some irreversible.
And how fast their cars are, right? Yeah. That's what happens in that circle. And something my parents told me when I was younger that I absolutely refused to accept, but I realized like how true it was, is that like you do become like the friends that you keep, right? You do become like that circle you surround yourself with. Um, and I think in the past year or so, I've read a few different things that talk about like if you hang around 5 millionaires, you'll be the sixth.
Right.
You hang around 5 investors, you'll become the sixth. Conversely, though, if you
You hang out
hang
with five
around,
drunks.
yeah, if you hang around 5 alcoholics, you'll become the sixth. Um, and I've really started to look at my own circle and started to really kind of try to surround myself with smarter people, like guys that are more successful and um, that I can, hopefully learn from. That's what I hope to do, like within, our podcast, and like bringing great guys on there to talk about, of course they're going to have successful, awesome stories. But I think what's always been most beneficial to me is like, talk to me about how you failed, right?
Right.
Like share with us like the mistakes that you made. Because those I think are really valuable.
Or if you could have done this differently, how
Sure.
would you have approached the problem?
Right.
And what would that do for you in terms of success, like likely success? Yeah, I think that, going back to a theme of standing on the shoulders of giants and like learning from them. And I'm a very like, when it comes to learning, I'm a very hands-on guy. You have to show me how to do it, like explain how to make the sausage, show me how to make the sausage. Let's make sausage together so I can go home and make my own sausage. Replace sausage with passive income or something else, or investments.
Right.
I think it's such a valuable tool because let's face it, man, we get paid okay, as in our given our time and service and rank, but it's not the best for your mid-level enlisted, and coming up with
And it
different ways.
ends. Like no matter what anyone gets paid, like it all ends.
Yes.
Unless you just, you desire to work until you die. Right.
Right.
Like, and it doesn't matter if you make 300K a year. If anyone has plans to retire, you either have to take a huge sacrifice in what your standard of living is, or you have to find ways to make money without physically working or physically showing up to an employer every day. Right. So it doesn't matter. Like if we were to make 500K a year, and if we ever wanted to retire, that is going to go away in some way, whether or not you have a retirement fund or whether or not you have a pension coming. And I think that's important, that like either one or two things happen. You either create a great passive income opportunities or great investments, and you get to maintain a standard of living, or you're going to take a huge cut in your standard of living. So it's just kind of one or the other.
And I think to your point there, especially for younger folks, and maybe even for at least younger folks can recover from it, and, folks who are longer in the tooth, but there's probably some apprehension in getting involved with things like investments, something that's not a guarantee, something that you haven't done before. And I think part of the value add that we can bring to the table here is having folks explain, like, yes, there is some risk involved, but this is how you do it. This is how you mitigate risk. So because you're taking on, a $300,000 or $400,000 mortgage, like, yeah, you're taking on some big debt, but that's not unsecured debt. That's secured debt. That's good debt. This is how you can use debt to build wealth, to build passive income, and explain to folks the difference between that, to ease some of those concerns and those holdups, those hangups that prevent someone from otherwise making wise investments.
Yeah, I think a lot of times risk comes up. However, I think if you start to, I think risk sometimes is a cop out personally.
Yeah.
Because if you were to come to me and say, hey, look, here's some things you could do, Brandon, and you could, you're talking about a 10%, return on your investment, 15, 20%, whatever. and I'm like, I don't know, it's just really risky right now. I think if you were to do an inventory of like my life and an inventory of my decisions that I make on a daily basis, right? You'd find that there's probably a bit of a, I don't know, some conflict with what, I'm preaching, philosophically of like, oh, it's just too risky. But if you were to look at, decisions that the majority of people make, on their personal lives, and that is stripping anything to do with the military. Now let's add the military in there of just how risky it is to do a job in the military, right? Just the nature of what the U.S. military's purpose is.
Right.
I find it a bit of a cop out when someone's like, not very, I find oftentimes that like it's easier to say like it just sounds a little risky instead of saying or admitting I have no idea how to do that. Right. Saying that it's too risky makes you seem like you know how to do it. You just aren't comfortable with that level of risk. Because it's kind of sometimes it's a little challenging just to say, I don't have any idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so I remember when I bought my first house at first, and I was a staff sergeant. This was like between 2014 and 2016. And I was so scared. I thought like, there's no way I can afford this. It's like Joe, or it's like Tiger King. I'm never going to financially recover from this. This is crazy. And then afterwards, I'm like, man, I wish someone, if I get in a time machine and a DeLorean hit 88 miles an hour and go back and talk to myself 3 years before, I would have had a series of houses. I would have done some house hacking. I would have learned all about that and removed what I thought was risk, remove that apprehension and to understand like, this is how you build generational wealth. This is how you build passive income. You don't get rich working 40 to 50 hours a week, just grinding, at an hourly rate, right? You
Right.
might build a comfortable life, but you're not going to build sustainable wealth. You have to show up. You have to clock in. If you don't get paid. So I think that trying to figure out, how to use systems that already exist, there's already experts in these things, there's already people making, lots of money, making great lives for themselves. Let's examine and dissect what they've done and figure out, what their shortcomings were, and kind of have them light the path for us. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I see what you
hold
did.
that smoking lamp out and kind of peer into the darkness and show us the way.
Well, what we've seen, like, right, even in our own community, right, in the military, I hate saying 100% of the time because like I don't like the absolute of that. But let's just say, because I don't know of a different time, we'll say the majority, but I can almost confidently say 100% of the time that I have, submitted a proposal for something, right? When someone says no, or I think it's too risky, in my experience, it has always been because you're just not familiar with this, right? Like when you just don't know a lot about something, it naturally makes you a little apprehensive of like, I don't really know, it feels risky. So to me, when somebody feels there's too much risk, I've always found that the solution to that is more education.
Absolutely. And from a military perspective, especially even first responders, like, when a squad leader, a sergeant's about to lead a patrol in Al Anbar or Helmand, and everybody inserts that magazine, racks that round, a 22-year-old steps off leading that adventure, that expedition. Like, how risky is that? That's risky as all get out.
Right.
And then we come back and we're like, oh, who's that debt guy? Famous economist, financial advisor. He's like, zero debt, zero debt, zero debt.
Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, I think it is Dave Ramsey, who preaches zero debt, when in fact, like, maybe having debt is a great thing because you can leverage different pots of money in different places.
Right.
So I think that from a military mindset, we're very risk adverse when it comes to our own life and limb. So we're not so risk adverse when it comes to stepping off on that patrol into the Wild West at risk to our life and limb.
Right.
When we get back home, we're like, gee, I don't know if I want to put, $300 a month into this thing that could potentially, grow great wealth for me. That sounds risky. And to your point, it's a lack of education. So let's bring that education, that scholarship, let's bring that, to a forum and share that with as many people as we can. I think that's great.
I was just talking to Josh about this
Yeah.
yesterday. Of that, like, in a military organization to where the wars are dying down, right? It's just not as a full scale war, as maybe it was 15 years ago. And that in an organization that is fully capable of assessing risk and still moving forward, where the risk could be like, right, you lose American lives. Now you take that same organization when that's not commonplace anymore. I was telling Josh about how it seems like the biggest fear now is like a bad email, right?
Yeah.
A bad phone call. A commander asks a question or is upset about something. And yet we attribute the same level of like aversion to it. Right. 15 years ago, you would say, hey, we want to do everything we can to not lose Marines' lives. Now we want to do everything we can to not get a bad email. And I think we're better than that. But it does go back to like, hey, what if we just educate? Like things aren't as bad as maybe like your default doesn't have to be that the world is really bad and everything, Murphy's law, everything bad that could happen will happen on tomorrow. That's just a terrible place, I think, to live, and a terrible place to like wake up every day.
Well, we gotta navigate out of that, and through interviewing different guests, hearing other people's success stories. I think those can provide those navigational beacons to say, like, yeah, you can live in that world, but there's a path out of that. There's a path to somewhere better. Can you hear those things popping up?
No.
Like the Bing? Oh, yeah, I shouldn't have said that then. I got notifications on my computer. But back to what I'm talking about, having these navigational beacons, sort of a pathway out of thinking like, no, I just got to stay in my bubble. Risk is a bad thing. Risk is too great, when in fact it's probably pretty minimal. We're talking like some real estate investments, just as an example, providing that pathway. Because if I knew what I knew 10 years ago, I'd be in a very different position financially. You as well.
Yeah.
But I think if we can communicate this to our younger crowd, our younger generation, our military members that are in their 20s, and if that helps them be successful, I think that's a great thing too. We light the path for them and say, hey, yeah, you're listening to a couple old guys sit here and shooting the breeze, but there's value added in that. Put away that Mustang. you get you one of those when you're in your 40s. That's for a midlife crisis, my man. Like right now, let's focus on some investments. So when you do have that midlife crisis, you can go get that Mustang.
Right. I think we've done a pretty good job, at least kind of shaping of at least what our goals are, right? Or like why we want to do this. I think next episode, I think I think we should flush out of like, okay, here's like our themes of like, here's where we're going to go. Because I know you and I, we chalked it up, threw it on a whiteboard. And I think that would be really helpful to like share, to kind of see like here's kind of like the breadth, to include the depth of like where we're hoping to go with this. Because I think there's a lot of things out there that don't require you going $100,000 in debt, right, to get an education at a college or a university. That most information is free. It's just, how do you filter the information to where it's useful? Because not all information is useful. But I would say like if, I like your analogy of like, hey, following that guy that's kind of like lighting the path for you. I look at it as like you're following the guy in land nav. It's that one guy that everyone knows, like he knows what he's doing. So we're just going to follow right behind him, do a ranger file. um, and that's where I hope some of our guests can, bringing them on is that they can light that same path, saying like, hey, just follow me. Like I've done this before. I've failed, got knocked down, got back up, and I'm better for it now. And I think that would be really helpful to anyone in the audience.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, man. And if you had asked me, the day I graduated the University of Houston with a degree in history and a minor in art history back in 2005, I should have listened to my dad and studied business. I was way too smart for that, though. I thought like, hey, my education ends today. I'm done with that. Like that was something I can put in a box, and education was a burden. It was, a lot of due dates. It was just a lot of work. It was many hours, many essays, all this other stuff that was cumbersome, when that's not education. That's
Right.
That's something else.
That's just pursuit of, in my opinion, right? I wouldn't knock anybody getting their degree.
No,
But for my purposes, that is the pursuit of a piece of paper.
Yes.
And
it was my attitude about it.
That piece of paper is really important depending on what type of employer you're looking for. And I use that word kind of tongue in cheek, because if you're wanting to be your own employer, well, then you get to determine if that piece of paper matters to you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an important piece of paper to an employer, but if you are interested in being an entrepreneur or your own employer, you get to determine if that piece of paper has any value.
When I bought my most recent property and we were in the underwriting process, I can tell you right now, the one piece of paper they did not ask for was my degree.
Right.
They want to see every other piece of paper in my life.
That's true. Yeah.
They didn't care. That was not a factor. That's not to diminish again a degree, but I don't think we should I think as a country, we've gotten to the point where we overemphasize that, at the expense of student debt, lifelong debt, instead of a lifelong pursuit of betterment of education. Maybe it's reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or listening to Bigger Pockets podcast, or listening to other podcasts. That's still education. That's still lifelong learning. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean deadlines have to be associated with it. You have to sit, back when I went to college, we didn't have the interweb. We had to sit in a room with a professor, or nowadays sit on on a blackboard, forum or whatever. There's many more ways to learn equally valuable skills that will potentially greatly improve your quality of life. So, mm-hmm. Yeah. But like you said, man, I think we've done a great job of kind of introducing our goals. And the next time, I think absolutely we'll lay down all of the different topics that we want to discuss. I thought we've got some big tree branch topics and really cool things. We want to talk about everything from like real estate to mental health to current events. And if we could maybe spend, the same amount of time next episode, sort of deep dive in that, I think that would be, you kind of lay out the, the map overlay of where we want to go with this and give people some insight. But I'm really happy with how this went, man. I think that Smoking Lamp Scholars or Smoke Lamp Scholars. What do you think? Smoking Lamp or Smoke Lamp Scholars?
Smoking Lamp.
Smoking Lamp Scholars. Okay.
Yeah.
I like it, man. I'm really happy that we came to agreement on that. That's a win. Right. John and Brandon agreed on something. That's cool.
I know, right? Hey, small victories.
It ain't always like that.
Yeah.
Well, brother, man.
We're trying to return with honor.
Right. But so I guess we gotta sign it out then, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm John.
And I'm Brandon.
And that's Smoking Lamp Scholars signing off.
First episode.
Won't be the last. Hopefully. Thanks, brother. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.
All right.